The Calloway wedding was the event of the year in San Francisco, held at the Legion of Honor Museum, swathed in ivory silk and lit like a dream from a billionaire's Pinterest board. The scent of white gardenias drifted through the open-air courtyard, mingling with the notes of a string quartet flown in from New York. Waiters in black velvet jackets glided between rows of mahogany chairs, offering crystal flutes of champagne to a guest list that read like the Forbes 400. And at the center of it all stood Ethan Calloway, billionaire tech mogul, Silicon Valley golden boy, and, as the press often described him, America's most eligible mind. To everyone watching, he looked exactly as he should. Tall, sharply dressed in a custom charcoal tux, expression unreadable but commanding. The kind of man who owned the room even when he wasn't speaking. He smiled on cue. He nodded at donors and senators. He held his fiancée Ivy's hand gently, deliberately, like a man completely in control. But Ethan wasn't present. Not really. His eyes moved, but his mind drifted. Somewhere between the cellist's rendition of Clair de Lune and his best man's laugh echoing off the marble, he realized he felt absolutely nothing. No rush, no nerves. Just the familiar, quiet hum of his own detachment, like a plane flying too high to feel the turbulence below. He had felt this way since he was 28 and sold his second company for $1.4 billion. That was the day the world stopped being unpredictable. It became curated, arranged, padded, safe. Now, at 37, Ethan's life was so precisely managed that his calendar was color-coded down to his cardio sessions. Catherine, his mother and the iron-willed architect of his public image, had once said, "Control is the currency of the powerful," and Ethan had lived by that, until lately, when even control felt hollow. He glanced at Ivy, radiant in a custom off-shoulder gown that shimmered in the sunlight. She was everything he was supposed to want, beautiful, articulate, bred for politics and polished dinners. She knew how to smile without blinking under camera flashes, how to turn a conversation without ever saying something real. She was perfect. Which made Ethan wonder why, deep down, he wanted to disappear. The officiant's voice broke through the orchestral haze. "We are gathered here today to witness—" Ethan tuned out again. His gaze wandered past the rows of seats. There were hedge fund titans, an Oscar winner, the Secretary of Commerce, his college roommate who now ran a cryptocurrency hedge fund. Not a single person from his childhood. Not one soul who knew him before the suits and spotlights. He hadn't even realized it until now. A soft breeze rustled the fabric of the canopy, and Ethan felt it, like a whisper that didn't belong. The hairs on the back of his neck rose. Then he saw her. Near the aisle, just beyond the crowd, a woman stood in a navy blue dress, her shoulders squared, her dark hair swept up in a no-nonsense twist that framed a face he hadn't seen in 8 years. Sabrina. Time didn't slow, it stopped. Like a record scratch in the middle of a symphony. She didn't belong to this world, not this curated, polished, PR-driven pageant. She stood like truth in a sea of performance. Unblinking, unapologetic. And beside her, gripping her hand with small fingers, was a boy. Ethan's heart stuttered. The child looked about 7, tan skin, a crown of messy black hair, big alert eyes set beneath thick brows. The same sharp jaw Ethan saw every time he glanced at a mirror. A little version of himself. The champagne flute slipped from his hand, shattering against the marble. Gasps. Silence. Eyes turning. But all Ethan could do was stare. The boy tilted his head, mirroring Ethan's own subtle, calculating habit. Then blinked. One slow blink, curious and unafraid. The officiant froze. Ivy's hand went rigid in his. Catherine's voice was a low hiss at his back. "Ethan, what the hell is this?" Sabrina began to walk down the aisle, not slow, not hesitant, not for show, just forward, direct, as if no one else existed. When she stopped at the front row, facing him, her voice carried with terrifying clarity, "Ethan Calloway, this is your son." And in that instant, everything Ethan had built, every dollar, every deal, every curated relationship, meant nothing. Because something real had finally broken through, and it was looking up at him with his own eyes. For a moment, no one breathed. The wedding crowd stood frozen, donors, diplomats, and distant relatives caught in a tableau of disbelief. The quartet had gone silent. The servers clutched their trays mid-step. Even the sunlight seemed to pause, casting long shadows over white roses and spilled champagne. Ethan didn't speak. He couldn't. He just stared at the boy. His boy. And he knew it. There was no need for a test or a court summons. The truth was right there, in the slope of the kid's nose, the way he held his shoulders slightly back, like he was expecting the world to misunderstand him. The child shifted beside Sabrina and looked up, blinking at Ethan with an expression that wasn't fear or awe, just waiting. Sabrina's voice, when she spoke again, cut through the silence like a thread pulled tight. "His name is Leo." She turned slightly so the boy was fully visible to the wedding party. "He's 7, and I tried to tell you." Ivy's voice sliced in next, sharp and brittle. "Who is this? Ethan, who is she?" He didn't answer. Couldn't. Sabrina's eyes didn't flinch. "We were together 8 years ago. I left because I didn't fit into this." She gestured toward the floral arch, the curated elite, "and because your mother made it very clear I never would." Catherine stepped forward like she was descending a throne, her voice cool and measured. "This is outrageous. A tasteless interruption. Security." "Don't," Ethan said quietly. The single word stopped everyone, even Catherine. He looked at Sabrina for the first time, really looked. She was older, not aged, not worn, just stronger. She wasn't the soft-spoken, wide-eyed girl he remembered. She carried herself like someone who had learned to stand alone, but in her eyes, behind the steel, was something else. Hurt, layered and weathered, but alive. "You could have called," Ethan said, the words dry on his tongue. "I did," she replied, voice low but steady. "I wrote. I left messages." For months, Ethan glanced at Catherine. She didn't blink. "I had no idea," he said, though the words sounded hollow in his own ears. Sabrina gave a tight, humorless laugh. "Of course you didn't. Why would the great Ethan Calloway need to hear from some ex with a baby? Easier to let someone else filter the noise, right?" The boy, Leo, tugged gently at her sleeve. "Can we go now?" "In a minute, sweetheart," she whispered, brushing his hair back with her hand. Something twisted in Ethan's gut. That simple gesture, the way she touched their son's head, was intimate in a way he'd never known. Familiar, practiced, parental. A pang hit him. 7 years of birthdays, first steps, flu seasons, nightmares, questions. He'd missed all of it, and it was his fault. "I didn't come to ruin your wedding," Sabrina said. "I came because I couldn't keep letting him ask me where his dad is, not when he's old enough to see the truth for himself." Ivy was trembling now. Her voice, when it came, was a hiss of humiliation. "Ethan, say something. Tell her this isn't true, that she's lying." "I'm not," Sabrina said simply. "I didn't ask you," Ivy snapped. Catherine stepped forward, placing a hand on Ethan's arm. Her grip was deceptively light. "You don't owe anyone anything right now," she said softly. "We'll deal with this, discreetly, after." He pulled his arm away. "I need a minute," Ethan said, more to himself than anyone else. But Sabrina was already moving. She reached down, took Leo's hand and turned. "Wait," Ethan called out. She paused barely. He stepped down from the altar, tuxedo immaculate, shoes shining like mirrors, and followed her through the stunned silence of the guests. He caught up to them just before the stone archway that led out of the courtyard. "Is he really mine?" he asked, not because he doubted it, but because he didn't know what else to say. Sabrina turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Look at him," she said. "Really look." And he did. Leo stared back at him, not with the blind awe of a child meeting a celebrity, but with the cautious openness of someone who might want to trust, but doesn't know how. Something broke loose in Ethan's chest, a quiet, aching crack. The kind that doesn't roar, it hums, it burrows. He crouched slightly, his voice gentler now. "Hi, Leo." The boy tilted his head again like a mirror. "Hi," he said quietly, then looked up at Sabrina. "Can we go now?" Sabrina nodded. "Yes, baby." And just like that, they were gone. As Ethan turned back toward the crowd, toward Ivy, who stood like a statue, white knuckles clenching her bouquet, and Catherine, whose mask of composure was cracking at the edges, he realized something terrifying. He didn't want to go back. Not to the wedding. Not to the lie. Not anymore. Ethan didn't remember walking back up the aisle. He didn't remember the judge stepping quietly aside, the quartet packing their instruments in stunned silence, or the guests parting like water as he passed. He didn't even feel Ivy's hand slap across his chest when he reached her. Just the echo of her voice, low and shaking, like someone clinging to dignity by a thread. "You ruined everything." He didn't respond. He couldn't. Not to her. Not yet. His tuxedo jacket was too warm. The courtyard suddenly too bright. And everywhere, eyes, watching, judging, tweeting, probably already drafting headlines. Tech Titans wedding crashes after surprise child reveal. "Dad?" In front of 200 guests, woman introduces Ethan Calloway to son. Calloway chaos. The wedding, the woman, the legacy in jeopardy. He could hear the headlines in his head as clearly as he could still hear Leo's voice. "Hi." Just that. Just one syllable. Soft and real and completely unfiltered. Catherine was at his elbow again. "Ethan, we need to move now. Before this spirals, I'll get the crisis team on the phone." Her voice was cool, almost gentle, but there was steel beneath it, always. The tone she used when steering senators and CEOs alike. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't see the woman who raised him. He saw the one who'd designed him, who'd shaped his life like a brand, each move calculated for maximum ROI. "I'm not going back up there," he said. Catherine's mouth twitched. "You most certainly are." "I'm not marrying Ivy." A hush fell between them, more potent than any outburst. Ivy, just steps away, stared at him like she didn't recognize the man standing in her wedding. "What the hell does that mean?" she asked, voice clipped. "It means I can't pretend," Ethan said, barely above a whisper. Her expression cracked, just for a moment, and behind the polish, he saw it. Fear, shame, fury, but not heartbreak. Not really. That was the saddest part. "You humiliate me in front of the entire city," she said through gritted teeth. "And now you're what? Going to run off and play house with some child you didn't even know existed?" Catherine stepped between them, always the strategist. "This isn't the time or place." "It never is," Ethan snapped. Silence again. He turned and walked out, just like that. No apology, no goodbye, just the quiet footsteps of a man walking away from the life that had been planned for him since he first wrote a line of code at age 11. He got in his car, didn't ask for the driver, didn't call ahead. He just drove, the streets of San Francisco blurring past in sharp, expensive architecture and fog-softened edges. It wasn't until he reached his penthouse, glass-walled, perched above the city like a goddamn throne, that he realized his hands were shaking. He poured himself a drink. Scotch. Neat. The same bottle he'd been gifted when he closed the Becker deal. He hadn't touched it before. He hadn't wanted to mark the memory. Now it felt like all he had was memory. He sat in the sleek leather armchair facing the skyline, lights blinking like indifferent stars. He had everything: a private elevator, an entire floor of curated luxury, a company worth billions, and a son he didn't know, a son who looked like him, a son who had been kept from him, or maybe a son he hadn't fought to find. Ethan stared at the drink in his hand, then set it down untouched. He picked up his phone. No missed calls, no messages from Sabrina, no news alerts, not yet. He scrolled through contacts, hovering over her name. He hadn't called it in years. It shouldn't have even been in his phone, but it was. He tapped it. It rang once, twice. Then voicemail. Her voice, calm, neutral, filled the speaker. "You've reached Sabrina Reyes. Leave a message." He didn't. He hung up. What could he say? "Sorry I didn't notice your absence for 7 years. Sorry I let my mother filter my life like a spam folder. Sorry I kept building a world so curated that there was no room for anything real." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. The silence in his apartment was suffocating. He'd once considered it a sanctuary. Now it just echoed. After a long stretch, he stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, the city buzzed on as if nothing had happened. Horns, sirens, lives. And somewhere out there, his son, was being tucked into bed by a woman who had once loved him enough to try, to reach out, to fight. He hadn't answered, but maybe it wasn't too late. The buzzer echoed through the modest apartment hallway, shrill and out of place among the chipped paint and quiet shadows of the building. Sabrina Reyes paused mid-sentence as she read to Leo from his dinosaur encyclopedia, her voice catching. She looked at the clock, 10:14 p.m. She wasn't expecting anyone. Leo, still in his pajamas, looked up with sleepy curiosity. "Is it the pizza guy?" "We didn't order pizza, baby," she said softly, brushing his curls from his forehead. "Keep reading about the Triceratops. I'll be right back." She walked to the intercom, half expecting it to be a delivery mistake or a neighbor locked out again. But when she pressed the button, a familiar voice answered, "Sabrina, it's me." Her stomach dropped. She didn't respond right away. "Please." Ethan's voice came again. "I just want to talk." She hesitated for a long beat, then buzzed him in. He stood in the hallway outside her apartment a moment later, still in the suit from the wedding, tie loosened, hair slightly tousled. The mask of perfection was gone, and for once, he looked like a man, not a headline. Sabrina folded her arms and leaned against the doorframe. "Did you get lost on your way back to the altar?" Ethan didn't flinch. "I walked away." She blinked. "From the wedding?" He nodded. "I couldn't go through with it." The silence stretched between them. Finally, she stepped back and opened the door wider. 5 minutes. I have a kid asleep in the next room." The apartment was warm but worn, cozy, filled with signs of life. A stack of coloring books on the coffee table, a dinosaur mobile hanging above the small kitchen table, a pair of sneakers by the door, one shoe tipped on its side. Ethan took it all in like a man walking into another dimension. His world was all glass and steel. This was soft, real. Sabrina watched him. "I need to know," he said quietly. "I need to know if he's mine." Her eyes narrowed. "You don't already know?" "I do," he admitted. "But I have to be sure, not for me. For him, for you." She moved to the kitchen and pulled open a drawer, tossed a business card on the counter. "There's a lab near Union Square. Go in the morning. Tell them I sent you. They've already tested Leo. They're just waiting for the sample." Ethan looked down at the card, then back at her. "You already had this planned?" She crossed her arms again. "I've had it planned since he turned 5. I didn't want to keep guessing. I just never had the chance to follow through." His brow furrowed. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I tried, Ethan," she said, voice tight. "I called. I left messages with your assistant. I sent letters. I never got them." She arched a brow. "Of course you didn't. Catherine made damn sure of that." He shook his head slowly, disbelief swimming in his eyes. "I didn't even know you were pregnant," he said. Sabrina's laugh was bitter. "Because your mother decided I wasn't part of the narrative. I was a glitch in the brand." "You think I wanted this?" he asked, voice rising. "You think I wouldn't have wanted to know I had a son?" She stepped closer now, her eyes fiery. "Number, I think you were too wrapped up in your empire to notice you were losing something real. And now? Now you want a DNA test like you're buying into a startup." That landed hard. He exhaled, jaw tight. "I'm not here to win. I'm here because I can't stop seeing his face. I don't care what it costs. I just—" He stopped himself, shoulders slumping. "I just need to start somewhere." Sabrina studied him for a long moment. Then her voice softened, just a little. "You're late, Ethan. So late. And Leo, he's not a prop in your redemption arc." "I know," he said quietly, "but I want to try." Another silence. This one not angry, just heavy. From the bedroom, Leo's voice drifted faintly. "Mom? Did the T-Rex eat the Triceratops or not?" Sabrina's face flickered with a weary smile. "Not if the Triceratops had backup," she called back. Ethan smiled before he could stop himself. She noticed. "I'll call the lab," she said. "Be there by 10. No press, no handlers, just you." He nodded. "I'll be there." She walked him to the door. Before she closed it, she paused. "For what it's worth," she said, "he has your eyes." Then she shut the door. Ethan stood in the hallway, alone, staring at the number etched into the business card in his hand. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel powerful. He felt like a man on the outside looking in. And for once, all the money in the world couldn't open that door. The waiting room was nothing like the pristine conference rooms Ethan was used to. No polished chrome, no silent staff gliding past with curated smiles. Just an aging ficus plant, a flickering wall sconce, and the persistent hum of a vending machine. He sat in a cracked leather chair, bouncing one knee out of sheer nerves. Across the room, Sabrina sat beside Leo, calmly flipping through a children's dinosaur book as if this were just another weekday errand. The contrast between them was stark. Ethan wore a crisp button-down and tailored jeans that still screamed wealth, despite his attempt to dress down. Sabrina wore a loose sweater and jeans, hair twisted into a quick braid, skin fresh and makeup-free. Leo sat between them, legs swinging off the chair, one untied sneaker tapping lightly against the tiled floor. He didn't look at Ethan. Not once. His focus was entirely on the page in front of him, a Triceratops mid-charge. Ethan studied the boy in stolen glances, his hair curled in the same unruly way his had at that age. He bit his lip when concentrating. And the shape of his jaw, God, it was like looking into a mirror 25 years removed. The receptionist called their name. Sabrina stood, touching Leo's shoulder. "Come on, love." Ethan followed them down the hall to a small clinical room. The nurse was cheerful, professional. She explained the procedure with a practiced ease, but Ethan barely heard her. His heart was hammering so loudly it drowned out the details. When Leo sat on the exam table, the nurse rolled up his sleeve. "You're going to feel a little pinch, okay?" she said gently. Leo didn't flinch, just stared straight ahead, jaw set. Ethan's breath caught. That same quiet resolve, that same stubborn refusal to show weakness. He remembered being a boy in prep school, hiding tears from his classmates after skinning his knee, because his father told him, "Crying makes people think they can beat you." The nurse looked up. "Ready?" Leo gave a single nod. The blood draw was quick, but Ethan felt every second. He hadn't been there for Leo's first steps, his first fever, his first scraped knee, and now here he was, standing 6 feet away while a stranger stuck a needle in his son's arm. His son. When it was over, the nurse wrapped a cartoon bandage around Leo's arm and handed him a sticker. He chose one with a smiling velociraptor and quietly thanked her. Sabrina gave him a small smile. "You did great, buddy." Leo slipped his hand into hers without a word. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. Sabrina glanced at him. "It'll take 3 days. You'll get the results at the same time I do." He nodded. "Thank you for doing this." She looked at him, expression unreadable. "It's not a favor, Ethan. It's a responsibility." They walked out together, Leo between them. The sun had broken through the morning fog outside, casting soft gold across the sidewalk. Ethan hesitated at the curb. "Sabrina," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" She turned to face him. "What does he know about me?" She looked down at Leo, who was now crouched on the ground, inspecting an anthill with quiet fascination. "Not much," she said. "When he was younger, I told him you lived far away, that we weren't together, but it didn't mean he wasn't loved, that you were smart and busy. I kept it light." Ethan swallowed. "And now?" "Now?" Her voice tightened slightly. "Now he asks why you've never called, why all the other kids in his class get picked up by their dads sometimes, why he's never even met his." The words sliced deeper than he expected. "I didn't know," he murmured. "I know," she said, "and that's the part that hurts most." Leo stood and tugged her hand. "Can we get pancakes?" She smiled down at him. "Sure, pancakes sound perfect." She turned back to Ethan. "You want the truth?" she asked. He nodded. "If the test says he's yours," she said evenly, "don't think that means you're in his life automatically. He's not a second chance you get to cash in. He's a person, a real small, messy person, and you'll have to earn him." Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing every word. "I want to." "Then show up," she said, consistently, quietly, no cameras, no headlines, just show up. Then she walked away, Leo's hand in hers, his tiny velociraptor sticker flapping in the breeze. Ethan watched them disappear around the corner. 3 days. 3 days until the results came back. But he already knew. He felt it in his gut, in the tightening of his chest, in the way he couldn't stop thinking about a child who loved dinosaurs and didn't cry during needles. Leo was his. Now came the hard part, proving he deserved to be called Dad. The silence in Ethan's penthouse was a kind he'd never noticed before. Sterile, curated, almost hostile. Every object had a place. Every surface gleamed, but none of it felt like his. Not anymore. He stood in his home office, lights dimmed, the city glowing through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. On his desk, a heavy stack of unopened letters sat like a bruise, unfamiliar handwriting scrawled across envelopes. The return address, S. Reyes. He hadn't even known they existed. Not until tonight. It had started with a feeling, an itch beneath the skin, a restlessness that had driven him back to the building after hours. He told the security team he needed privacy and shut down the surveillance. No assistant, no driver, just him, inside the bowels of Callaway Tech, digging through his own digital graveyard. The archived folder was buried beneath legal correspondence, flagged non-priority by his executive assistant Patricia, who had handled his communications since year 3 of his empire. At first, he thought the emails were spam. Subject lines like, "Please read. This is important and I'm not asking for money. I just want you to know." But then he saw her name, over and over, Sabrina Reyes, dozens of messages, some calm, some desperate. One with a photo attached, a blurry image of a baby wrapped in a green fleece blanket, his eyes barely open, his mouth puckered in sleep. Leo, at 2 months. Ethan stared at the photo, bile rising in his throat. How had this been hidden from him? The rage that simmered beneath the surface all week now boiled over. He grabbed his phone and called Patricia. It was nearly midnight, but she picked up on the second ring. "Ethan? Everything okay?" "No," he said flatly. "Come to the office, now." Silence. Then a quiet, "Yes, sir." He hung up. An hour later, she stepped into his office, dressed in a sharp navy blazer and jeans, her face carefully composed. Patricia had been with him since the early days, fiercely loyal and ruthlessly efficient. But tonight, she looked cautious, wary. "You wanted to see me?" He didn't speak right away. He just handed her the stack of letters. Watched her eyes flick across the envelopes. Watched the moment recognition hit. "I asked you a question," Ethan said, voice calm but cold. "Why didn't I see these?" Patricia hesitated. "Your mother, Catherine, she asked me to screen all direct correspondence after your second company went public. We were getting hit with lawsuits, stalkers, media traps. Sabrina's name. It came up on a flagged list." Ethan's jaw tightened. "So you threw her letters away?" "I was told to protect your time, your image." He leaned forward. "From what, exactly? A woman trying to tell me I had a son?" Patricia didn't flinch. "You told me once that distractions cost billions. I did what I thought you wanted." "No," he said, voice rising. "You did what Catherine wanted, and I let you. I trusted you to filter noise, not erase my life." A long silence followed. Finally, Patricia spoke, softer now. "Ethan, if I thought for a second it was real, I would have said something." "It was never your choice," he said. "None of this should have been your call." She looked down, remorse flashing across her features. "I'm sorry." Ethan turned away, one hand raking through his hair. Sorry. What a small, useless word. He thought of Sabrina's voice, measured, restrained. He's not a second chance you get to cash in. He's a person. And Leo's quiet strength. The way he didn't cry during the blood draw. The way he asked if dinosaurs still roamed the earth with such honest wonder. "You're fired," Ethan said finally, without turning around. There was a beat of silence. Patricia swallowed, nodded once, and walked out without another word. He stood there for a long time after the door closed, the city buzzing below him like a hive of disinterest. All these years, he'd been praised for how well he'd built his fortress. A company, a legacy, a future. But what good was a fortress if it only kept out the things that mattered? His son had been living 10 miles away, and he'd missed it all. The first laugh, the first steps, the first time Leo had drawn a dinosaur with crayon and held it up proudly, hoping someone would tape it to the fridge. Ethan had been taping stock tickers to glass walls while that happened. He looked back down at the photo on his screen. The baby was asleep, peaceful, trusting. A knock came at the office door. It was Jordan, his best friend, his lawyer, and maybe the only person who wouldn't sugarcoat the truth. Ethan didn't move. Jordan stepped inside, tossed his keys on the couch. "Got your text. You look like hell." "I fired Patricia." "Finally." Ethan looked at him. "You knew?" Jordan nodded grimly. "She was following Catherine's playbook. I told you years ago she was managing you like a client, not a person." Ethan sat down heavily. She hid my son from me. Jordan sat across from him, hands folded. What are you going to do now? I'm going to show up, Ethan said. No handlers, no spin. I'm going to be the man I should have been 7 years ago. Jordan nodded, something like pride softening his face. Good. Ethan turned back to the city lights. It was time to stop building legacies for other people. It was time to start building a life. For Leo. The next morning, Ethan didn't show up at the office. Calls flooded in. His executive team panicked. A scheduled interview with Forbes was postponed indefinitely. The media was still riding high on the wedding fiasco, speculating everything from an emotional breakdown to a midlife crisis. But Ethan didn't care. He was in Jordan's apartment, smaller, older, far less curated than his own. But it felt real. Books were stacked on side tables. Framed photos sat crookedly on shelves. A dog-eared copy of East of Eden lay open on the coffee table beside a chipped coffee mug. Ethan sat on the couch, barefoot, holding a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. The TV was off. Music played low from the corner. Sam Cooke, something about change coming. Jordan was in the kitchen, frying bacon with the kind of ease Ethan reserved for coding algorithms. You gonna just hold that drink all morning? Jordan asked, flipping a slice. You've been staring at it for 10 minutes. Ethan looked down at the glass. Haven't decided if I earned it. Jordan turned off the burner and grabbed 2 plates. You didn't. But it's bacon. No one earns that. It's just a blessing. Ethan cracked a tired smile. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The kind of silence that only long friendships can afford. Finally, Jordan broke it. I meant what I said last night, he said. It's good you fired Patricia. That was a long time coming. Ethan nodded, chewing slowly. It's not just Patricia. It's everything. My whole life's been curated. Even the regrets were pre-approved. Jordan leaned back in his chair. And now? Now, Ethan said, I want something real. I want to show up for Leo, for Sabrina, even if it's awkward, even if I get it wrong. Jordan looked at him for a moment, something unreadable in his expression. What? Ethan asked. You're late to the game, Jordan said. But you're lucky it's not too late. Most people don't get that shot. There was something in his voice, a heaviness, an echo. You're not just talking about me, Ethan said. Jordan exhaled. I had a daughter, Sophia, from a fling in college. I didn't find out until she was 4. By then, her mom was already married. Guy adopted her. Stable life. Good man. Ethan blinked. You never told me that. Jordan shrugged. Didn't seem relevant to quarterly earnings. Do you see her? Sometimes, Jordan said. Birthday card here, school photo there. But I'm not her dad. I'm just Jordan. The words hung in the air between them. Why didn't you fight? Ethan asked quietly. Because I waited too long, Jordan said, and I didn't want to tear up her world just to make myself feel better. Ethan leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I don't want to be that man. Then don't be, Jordan said. You've got money, yeah, but this isn't about money. It's about time, presence, showing up when there's nothing to gain. Ethan nodded slowly. The message landed. They sat in silence again, broken only by the soft hum of the city outside. After a while, Ethan stood. I've got to go. Jordan raised an eyebrow. You going to the office? No, Ethan said, grabbing his jacket. I'm going to a bookstore. Jordan blinked. You? Reading for fun? Ethan gave a half smile. I want to learn about dinosaurs. Thought I'd start with the basics. Jordan let out a laugh, then reached for his coffee. You're officially becoming a dad. Ethan paused at the door. I hope I'm not too late. Jordan's smile softened. You won't be. Not if you keep showing up. Outside, the city was alive with noise. Horns, heels, wind slicing between buildings. But for the first time in a long time, Ethan didn't feel numb to it. He walked 3 blocks to a small, independent bookstore nestled between a wine bar and a dry cleaner. Inside, the smell of old paper and cedar floors wrapped around him like a coat he didn't know he missed. He browsed awkwardly until a clerk approached. "Looking for something special?" she asked. "Dinosaurs," he said. "Something a 7-year-old would love." She smiled. "I've got just the thing." 15 minutes later, he walked out with 2 hardcover books, a sticker sheet, and a pencil case shaped like a T-Rex. He had no idea if Leo would even care, but it felt like a start. Later that afternoon, he texted Sabrina, "Hey, I'd like to drop off something for Leo. No pressure, just books. I'll leave them at the door. Let me know." The reply came 20 minutes later. "You can knock. He's been drawing all day. Just don't push." Ethan stared at the message. He took a breath, then headed to the one door in the city that finally mattered. The DNA test confirmed it. Ethan Calloway was Leo's biological father with a 99.9% probability, just shy of fate's own handwriting. He stared at the lab report on his phone, the sterile language blurring as emotion roared through him. Not surprise. He'd known the truth from the moment Leo had tilted his head just like him, suspicious and quiet and full of unspoken questions. But now it was official, unarguable. The numbers sealed it, stamped it, made it real in a way nothing else had. And that terrified him. Because now there were no excuses, no distance, no gatekeepers, just the raw, terrifying task of showing up. He stood outside Sabrina's apartment, gift bag in one hand, the report folded in his pocket. In the other hand, he held the T-Rex pencil case, its green tail poking out like a flag of goodwill. The door opened before he knocked. Sabrina looked tired. Her eyes were framed by the kind of exhaustion that came from years of doing everything alone. Meals, bedtime, school drop-offs, sick days. She wore leggings and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun, no trace of makeup. And still, she took his breath away. Not because she was polished, because she was real. He held up the bag a bit awkwardly. Books and a sticker sheet. For Leo. She nodded, stepping aside. "Come in." The living room was lived in. Markers on the coffee table. A cardboard box turned into a makeshift dinosaur habitat. A blanket fort half collapsed in the corner. Leo sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing with fierce concentration. He didn't look up. Ethan cleared his throat. "Hey, Leo." Leo glanced up briefly, then back down at his paper. Sabrina sat on the couch, watching. Ethan crouched beside the boy. "I brought you something." Leo paused, side-eyeing him. "Is it boring?" Ethan smiled. "Only if you hate dinosaurs." Leo reached for the bag with a speed that made Sabrina laugh quietly behind her hand. He pulled out the books, flipping one open immediately, fingers flying to the illustrated pages like he was scanning for facts he already knew by heart. "This one's wrong," he said after a moment, pointing. T-Rex didn't actually roar. They think it probably sounded more like a crocodile. Deep and rumbly. Ethan blinked. "I didn't know that." Leo shrugged. "Most books get it wrong." He turned another page, more comfortable now, but still not entirely trusting. "I got the test back," Ethan said, voice low, directed at Sabrina. Her gaze held his. "And?" He nodded. "He's mine." She inhaled sharply, then nodded. "I figured. I want to do this right," he said. "I know I can't make up for the time I missed, but I want to earn whatever time I can get. Even if that means starting slow. I'll do it however you need." Sabrina looked down, picking at the seam of the throw pillow. "You'll need to prove that to him. Not me." Ethan glanced at Leo, still absorbed in the book. I'm okay with that. Then Sabrina said something he didn't expect. You should come with us tomorrow. Ethan straightened. To what? Leo's school is doing a field trip to the Natural History Museum. Dinosaurs, fossils, the whole thing. They need parent chaperones. She raised an eyebrow. And technically I signed up, but I wouldn't mind backup. Ethan's heart lifted, then immediately plummeted as his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. Catherine. He let it ring. Sabrina tilted her head. You gonna answer that? No. But the voicemail came through a moment later. He read the preview on the screen, the pit in his stomach returning like a reflex. Ethan, we need to meet. Legal has flagged something. Sabrina may be planning to take Leo out of state. We need to move quickly. I've already contacted a family court consultant. He silenced the phone. Sabrina watched him carefully. Trouble? He hesitated. Just Catherine. Still trying to control the narrative? He didn't answer. She nodded slowly. You'll have to choose eventually. Her world or this one. I already have. Prove it, she said simply. Leo looked up then, clutching the pencil case. Can you come tomorrow? He asked, eyes hopeful, cautious. Ethan smiled, soft and stunned. Yeah, kid, I can. Leo turned back to his book without another word, but his shoulders relaxed just slightly. It was the first time he'd asked for him, and for Ethan Calloway, that meant everything. The Natural History Museum buzzed with the sound of young voices, echoing between towering dinosaur skeletons and display cases glowing with ancient fossils. It was field trip day, and the energy was electric. Kids running in clusters, teachers herding them with a mix of patience and mild panic. Ethan Calloway stood in the center of it all, wearing jeans, a plain gray hoodie, and a lanyard that read Chaperone in slightly crooked Sharpie. It was the first time in over a decade he'd worn something that didn't have a tailored hem or a logo attached to a billion-dollar brand. He looked ridiculous, and happier than he'd been in years. Leo stayed close, not quite holding his hand, but not wandering too far either. He pointed out facts Ethan didn't know about tail lengths and claw shapes, the difference between herbivores and carnivores. At one point, he corrected a tour guide mid-sentence with a casual, "Actually, sauropods didn't drag their tails. They held them up like whips." The tour guide blinked. "Well, yes, that's true." Ethan laughed. He's been reading. Sabrina trailed behind them, snapping photos with her phone, quiet ones from the side, capturing Ethan kneeling to listen to Leo or the boy's animated gestures when describing dinosaur migration. She didn't say much, but her eyes stayed on them, guarded, measuring. After lunch, the kids scattered into the museum's outdoor play area, a massive dino-themed jungle gym flanked by benches and shaded picnic tables. Sabrina sat down, unwrapping a sandwich. Ethan stayed standing, arms crossed as he watched Leo climb onto a rope ladder shaped like a brontosaurus spine. "Do you remember when we came here?" Sabrina asked, not looking at him. Ethan glanced over. "You mean back then?" She nodded. "First year we were together. You were in a hoodie then, too." He chuckled. "I thought I looked rebellious." "You looked 27 and exhausted," she said, finally meeting his eyes. "But you smiled. Not the photo smile. The real one." They sat in silence for a few moments, the kind that didn't ache but settled gently. "You were happy once," she said softly, "before everything got optimized." He turned to her. "So were you." A shadow crossed her face. "I still am, most days, but I had to let go of the dream, the one where you came back." He looked down. "I should have come back." Sabrina opened her mouth to say something else, but was cut off by the sound of a phone buzzing. Ethan's. Again. He checked it, expecting another PR fire, but the text made his blood chill. Urgent. Received copy of legal filing this morning. Catherine Calloway is moving to establish temporary guardianship of Leo under emergency protective order. Grounds: emotional instability of the mother and paternal claim confusion. Call me. Jordan. He stood slowly. Sabrina saw the shift in his posture and stood too. What is it? She asked. He didn't hide it. He handed her the phone. She read the message once, then again. She didn't speak, didn't blink, just handed the phone back and turned toward the playground. Leo, she called, her voice even. The boy climbed down quickly, sensing something in her tone. Ethan stepped forward. Sabrina. I need to go, she said, gathering their things with mechanical precision. Sabrina, you said you were done letting her make decisions for you. I am. I didn't know about this. I didn't approve it. She looked at him, eyes wide with fury. You didn't stop it either. That's not fair. What's not fair, she said, voice low and shaking now, is raising a child for 7 years on my own and then getting blindsided by the possibility of losing him. That's not fair. Leo stood beside her now, confused, watching the adults like a puzzle he didn't have all the pieces for. Sabrina crouched down. We're going home, okay? Everything's fine. Leo frowned. Is he coming too? Sabrina hesitated. Not today, sweetheart. Leo's face fell. Ethan stepped back, letting her pass. As they walked away, Leo looked over his shoulder. Ethan raised his hand in a wave. Leo didn't wave back. Ethan stood frozen until they disappeared from view. Then he called Jordan. Tell me exactly what Catherine did, he said, voice cold. Jordan sounded grim. She filed through a private channel. Emergency family court. Said Sabrina's trying to withhold Leo. Claimed you're being manipulated. She's not, Ethan growled. We need to fight this. You sure? I'm not losing my son before I even get to be his father. Jordan exhaled. Then buckle up. Catherine's not going to back down without a war. Ethan stared out over the playground, now emptying. He'd spent his whole life protecting a legacy. Now he was going to fight for a life. 3 days. That's how long it had been since Ethan had heard from Sabrina. 3 days since the museum, since the text from Jordan, since he stood in a field of fake dinosaur bones and watched the only real thing in his life walk away, clutching the hand of the boy who had his eyes. 3 days of silence. No responses to his texts. No answer when he called. No updates from Jordan except one. She's moved out. That had stopped Ethan cold. She what? Jordan sighed on the other end of the line. Packed up. Left the apartment. No forwarding address. Lease termination filed through a lawyer. Why? Why do you think? Ethan sat in the corner of his living room, still in yesterday's shirt. He hadn't slept much. Couldn't. The penthouse felt like a museum of who he used to be. Sleek, spotless, and hollow. She's running, he muttered. She's protecting, Jordan corrected. She's seen this machine from the inside, remember? She knows how quickly people like your mother can turn family into leverage. Ethan stood, pacing. I never gave Catherine permission to do this. But you didn't stop her either. She filed as Leo's grandmother, not your proxy. That gives her standing. Then I'll strip her of it. Jordan paused. That means going public. Court filings. Press Sabrina's name in headlines. I don't care. She might. Ethan gritted his teeth, staring out at the skyline. The same view that used to make him feel powerful now felt like a prison window. He ended the call. By noon, he was parked outside Sabrina's old building. Her name was gone from the mailboxes. The super shrugged when he asked. Single mom with a kid, right? Moved out quick. Left the place spotless. Didn't say much. Ethan got back in his car, heart pounding. He had all the money in the world. Private investigators, legal teams, surveillance systems that could trace a missing person across 10 states in an hour. But he couldn't use them. Not for this. If he found her with a trace, he'd become exactly what Sabrina feared. A man who used power to compensate for absence, who showed up with lawyers instead of love. He wanted to earn the right to be Leo's father. That meant finding them without force. That night he sat in his office, staring at Leo's drawing, one Sabrina had quietly slipped into the dinosaur book he gave him. It was a crayon sketch of a T-Rex. Big smile, short arms. Beside it, 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, both wearing little hats. Leo had labeled them in shaky block letters, M-E and D-A-D. Ethan's throat closed. That question mark destroyed him. Not Dad, but Dad? A maybe, a hope, a test. And he'd failed it. He remembered something Jordan once said, back when they were both still building their empires, pre-kids, pre-real life. You can make millions being right, but you only keep people by being real. The next morning, Ethan went to Catherine's estate in Hillsborough. She met him at the door, in her silk robe, and that expression that always said, "I'm already 5 moves ahead." "Darling," she said smoothly, "I heard from the board. They're concerned. We should talk strategy." "I'm not here for strategy." She stepped back, letting him in. The house smelled like lilies and old money. Every piece of furniture felt like it came with an inheritance clause. "You filed for guardianship of my son," he said. She poured herself tea. "I filed for legal protection in case that woman decided to disappear with him, which, by the way, she now has." "You made her run," Ethan said. "I protected you from scandal," Catherine snapped, "from uncertainty, from entrapment." "She didn't want my money," he said. "She wanted me to show up, and you made sure I didn't." Catherine straightened her spine. "You think fatherhood is about bedtime stories and playgrounds? You're not built for that. You were born for more." "No," Ethan said quietly. "I was born. Leo is my more." Catherine's eyes narrowed. "You'd throw away everything I built for you, for what? A life in the suburbs? PTA, meetings, and macaroni art?" "I'd trade my entire portfolio," Ethan said, voice breaking, to hear him call me Dad without a question mark. He turned and walked out. That night he shut down the corporate press machine, canceled his appearances, called Jordan. "Send a letter to the court," he said. "We're withdrawing the petition. I won't let Catherine touch Leo's custody." Jordan was quiet. Then, "That might burn your last bridge with her." "It was never a bridge," Ethan said. "It was a leash." He hung up and sat back, surrounded by silence. Leo and Sabrina were gone, and for the first time Ethan had no control, no plan, just hope. And the question of whether he could become the man that little boy believed he might be. Ethan had expected a lot of things that week: lawsuits, silence, the sting of Leo's absence, but he hadn't expected Patricia to knock on his office door again. It was late. The building was quiet, cleaned out after hours. Ethan had returned to the company in small doses, though his mind was rarely on the quarterly roadmap. Tonight he sat behind his desk in sweats and an old Caltech hoodie, nursing a half-eaten protein bar and staring at Leo's dinosaur drawing taped to his monitor. Patricia stood in the doorway holding a manila folder, dressed like she hadn't been fired a week ago. "I shouldn't be here," she said softly. "You're right," he said without looking up. "I came to give you this." She stepped forward and set the folder on his desk. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside were printouts, dozens, originals of the emails Sabrina had sent over the years, some unread, some marked handled. Others had been tagged, "Do not forward, Catherine." There were also scans of letters, handwritten, some stained by what looked like water, or tears. "I kept them," Patricia said, "not to betray you, but because somewhere in the back of my mind I knew I was doing something wrong." Ethan ran a hand over his face. Why now? Because I saw your face at the wedding, and I saw what Catherine's still doing, and I remembered what it felt like to be loyal to a man I believed in, not the brand. You, the one who used to sneak off and eat burritos with interns, who used to talk about legacy like it meant something real. He looked up, tired but not cold. I don't know if that guy exists anymore. He does, Patricia said. I just don't think he knows how to fight dirty enough to win. She left before he could respond. Ethan sat in silence for a long time, going through the pages. The first letter had been sent just weeks after Sabrina found out she was pregnant. A short, panicked note scribbled on lined paper begging him to call. No demands, just a trembling need for connection. The next was gentler, then firmer, then angry, then silent. And in between, photos. Leo at 3 months in a onesie that read "Tiny but Mighty." Leo at 1 year with cake smeared on his cheeks. Leo asleep with a stuffed dinosaur tucked under his arm. Years of life he'd missed. But it was more than that. These weren't messages from a bitter ex. They were proof that Sabrina had tried. And Catherine had made sure he never knew. The next day, he stood on Catherine's doorstep again. This time, he didn't wait to be invited in. She opened the door, mouth poised for diplomacy, but stopped when she saw the folder in his hand. You lied to me, Ethan said. Catherine tilted her head, cool and unreadable. I protected you. No, he said, stepping inside. You erased him. She folded her arms. You were 29, building an empire. She was a distraction. She was my life and you took her from me. Catherine didn't blink. You think you would have stayed the course if you'd become a father back then? You would have been tethered to the ground before you learned how to fly. You would have resented her. And the child. You have no idea what I would have done. She stepped forward. You were built for power, for legacy. I gave you the future you have. No, he said, voice hard. You gave me a hollow victory. He tossed the folder onto her marble kitchen island. Your petition for guardianship? I shut it down. I told the court to dissolve it. Catherine's expression cracked for the first time. You'd give up control, just like that? I never had control, he said. I had performance, and I'm done performing. She stared at him for a long time, then turned away. You'll regret this, she said softly. No, he replied, but I regret missing my son's first words. He walked out without looking back. That afternoon he drove to Sabrina's old neighborhood again. He wasn't looking for her apartment. He was hoping for a neighbor, a lead, a thread, and luck found him. Mrs. Langley, an elderly woman who always sat on her stoop with a crossword, smiled when she saw him. You're Leo's dad. He stopped. Excuse me? I saw you at the museum. Sabrina told me. Don't worry, I'm good at keeping things to myself. She winked. Do you know where they went? Moved out fast, but she told me she might go stay with a friend in Oregon, teacher she used to work with. Ethan's heart kicked. Did she leave a name? Mrs. Langley grinned. Didn't have to. Sabrina always used the same password for her Wi-Fi. Miss Rhea's 3rd grade. She used to teach here before the budget cuts. That was enough. Later that night, Ethan was on a plane. Not with lawyers, not with press, just a backpack, Leo's drawing, and hope. Because this time he wasn't chasing redemption. He was chasing his family. Rain rolled off the roof of the rental car as Ethan sat parked outside the pale yellow craftsman-style house in Eugene, Oregon. It had taken 2 days, 3 dead ends, and 1 sympathetic school secretary who remembered a Miss Reyes with warm eyes and a son who knew more about dinosaurs than most textbooks. Now he was here. The porch light was on. A small tricycle leaned against the steps. A dinosaur raincoat hung from a hook by the door. He didn't move. This wasn't a pitch meeting. It wasn't a boardroom negotiation. He had nothing rehearsed, no strategy. Only the weight of every choice he hadn't made soon enough. And everything he still hoped wasn't lost. He stepped out into the drizzle and walked slowly up the steps. Before he could knock, the door opened. Sabrina stood in the doorway barefoot, in an oversized flannel shirt and leggings, hair loose around her face. She didn't look shocked to see him, only tired. "How did you find us?" she asked. "I didn't hire anyone," he said quickly. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Langley. She mentioned you had a friend up here." Sabrina leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. "So you flew across 2 states because a retired teacher mentioned Oregon?" "I flew across 2 states," he said, voice steady, "because I had to try." The sound of footsteps thumped behind her. Leo appeared, sock-footed and blinking sleepily. His hair was rumpled, and he clutched a small stuffed stegosaurus under one arm. He looked at Ethan and rubbed one eye. "You came," he said. Ethan's heart clenched. "Yeah," he whispered. "I did." Sabrina didn't say anything for a long beat. Then, "You can come in." For a little while. The inside of the house was simple and warm. A fire crackled in the corner. Bookshelves lined the walls filled with kids' books, puzzles, and framed photos. There were signs of a shared life here. Breakfast dishes in the sink, a half-finished Lego set on the coffee table. Leo plopped onto a beanbag near the fire and yawned, still holding his stegosaurus. Ethan stayed by the door. Sabrina motioned toward the kitchen. "Let's talk." He followed her into the small, bright kitchen, where mugs sat on the counter and a tea kettle steamed quietly. She poured water and handed him a mug. Chamomile. No small talk. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Because I messed up," he said. "Because I believed silence meant abandonment when it was actually interference. Because I let someone else decide what my life should look like. And I won't do that." Sabrina didn't look at him. "I shut down the guardianship petition," he continued. "I gave up the fight. Catherine's out. Permanently. My legal team's done." Now she looked at him. "You gave it up?" "I didn't want to win Leo like a business deal. I want to be in his life, if you'll let me, on your terms." Her face was unreadable. "I'm not here to make a scene, or to fix this in one visit. He looked down. "I want a shot to be real, not just rich, not just present when it's convenient. I want to earn him." Sabrina leaned against the counter, arms still crossed. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "You didn't show up at the hospital when he was born, or when he had croup at 6 months, or when he cried on his first day of school because the teacher mispronounced his name." "I know," Ethan said. "You missed every scrape, every birthday, every night he asked why his dad never wanted to meet him." "I know," he said again, throat tight. Sabrina's eyes glistened. "You don't get to waltz in here now with your name and your jet and rewrite history." "I'm not trying to rewrite it," he said. "I'm trying to be in it, starting now." A long silence passed between them. In the living room, Leo yawned again. Then, without prompting, he called out, "Can he tuck me in?" Sabrina blinked. Ethan looked at her, unsure. Her face softened, not a smile, not forgiveness, but something like surrender to the moment. "Go ahead," she said quietly, "just tonight." Ethan nodded, throat too tight to speak. He walked to the living room, knelt by Leo's side. Leo climbed into his blanket nest and pulled the stegosaurus close. "You want to know a secret?" he said sleepily. Ethan leaned in. "Always. I don't really like the T-Rex anymore. He's cool, but kind of mean." Ethan smiled. "Fair. I like the stegosaurus better. He looks tough, but he's nice, and his plates keep him safe." Ethan nodded. "Smart choice." Leo looked at him, eyes heavy with sleep. "I think you're a stegosaurus." Ethan blinked. Yeah? You look strong, Leo mumbled, but you're still figuring out how to be nice. Then he rolled over and drifted off. Ethan sat there, watching him breathe. Sabrina stood in the hallway, arms at her sides, watching him. And for the first time since that wedding, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like possibility. Ethan stood in the quiet of the living room long after Leo had fallen asleep. The only sound was the soft tick of the clock above the fireplace and the hush of the wind brushing against the windows. Leo's breathing was slow, steady, peaceful. Ethan hadn't felt this still in years. He didn't dare move, partly because he didn't want to disturb the boy, and partly because he was afraid that if he got up, the moment would evaporate. That this life, this real, messy, imperfect moment, was too fragile to survive daylight. Sabrina entered the room quietly, 2 mugs in her hands. I figured you wouldn't sleep either, she said, offering him one. He accepted it, the ceramic warm in his palms. The tea smelled like cinnamon and cloves. Comforting, familiar. They sat together on the couch, not touching, not too far apart either. He's a good kid, Ethan said, his voice soft. Sabrina nodded. He is. He's curious, smart, kind, tougher than I ever imagined. You thought he'd be soft? She asked, teasing just a little. I thought he'd be a stranger, Ethan admitted. But he's not. He feels like mine. Not just by blood. It's something else. Like I've known him longer than I have. Sabrina looked down into her tea. You missed so much. I know. She leaned back against the couch cushions. I used to rehearse the things I'd say to you, if you ever came. Some were angry. Some were hopeful. Some were really immature. Ethan smiled faintly. I'd probably deserve all of them. Maybe. But none of them fit when I saw you at the museum. You didn't look powerful. You looked lost. I was, he said. Still am sometimes. They sat in silence again. Do you regret it? She asked finally. The life you built? He thought for a long moment. I don't regret building something, he said. I regret not knowing what I was missing while I built it. Sabrina's eyes shimmered. Not from tears, but from the weight of what they were both holding. Years. Words left unsaid. Love rerouted into survival. I loved you, she said quietly. And not because you were ambitious or brilliant or rich. I loved you before any of that really mattered. Before you became a brand. Ethan turned to her. I loved you too. I just didn't know how to hold on to something real when I was being taught to chase something perfect. You don't get to ask for me back, she said gently, just because you're finally awake. I'm not asking, he said. I'm just here. She nodded slowly, accepting that. Leo asked me if we were going to become a family. Ethan's chest tightened. What did you say? I said I didn't know. That sometimes families look different than the stories. That sometimes they come back around in their own time. I want to be in his story, Ethan said, even if I'm not in the romantic ending of yours. Sabrina looked at him then. And what if you are? What if this version of you, the one who listens, who shows up, was all I ever needed? He blinked, caught off guard by the softness in her voice. I can't promise a fairy tale, he said. She smiled faintly. Good. I'm too old for fairy tales. But I'm not too old for real. He exhaled slowly, something unwinding in him that had been wound too tight for too long. She stood then, walking to the hallway. You can stay the night. Guest rooms down the hall. Sabrina, she turned. I want to earn the right to be more than a guest. She studied him for a long time, then nodded. Start by showing up again tomorrow morning. Eggs and pancakes at 7. Leo wakes up starving. He smiled. I'll be here. As she disappeared down the hall, Ethan sat back, staring into the fire. This wasn't a second chance. It was a new beginning. And for the first time in his adult life, he wasn't chasing success. He was staying still. For love. For Leo. And maybe, if he was lucky, for Sabrina too. The scent of pancakes and syrup floated through the air as sunlight filtered into the kitchen. Ethan stood at the stove, sleeves rolled up, flipping a slightly lopsided pancake with more concentration than he'd ever given a business merger. Behind him, Leo sat at the table, coloring a new dinosaur hybrid, part triceratops, part something with wings. Sabrina leaned against the doorway, sipping coffee, watching them both. "Careful," she said. "Last time you flipped one that fast, it landed on the cabinet." "That was a warm-up round," Ethan replied, grinning. "This one's the real deal." Leo glanced over. "Don't burn it." "Yes, sir," Ethan said with a mock salute. It had been 2 weeks since the night in Oregon. 2 weeks of slow mornings, homework help, grocery runs, and long, quiet talks after Leo went to bed. Ethan hadn't just shown up, he'd stayed. And that was the difference. No press, no assistance, no briefcase full of apologies, just presence. Every day, Sabrina had watched him grow into the kind of man who didn't announce his worth. He proved it. In the way he let Leo beat him at Uno, in how he never reached for his phone at dinner, in how he folded laundry without being asked, even if he did it wrong. The man who once ruled boardrooms with silence was now mastering bedtime stories. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments, missteps. Leo had outbursts. Ethan froze sometimes when real emotion rose too quickly. And Sabrina, she guarded her heart like it had survived war. Because it had. But something was shifting. Not in grand declarations or dramatic reunions. It happened in the in-between. Like now when Leo tugged Ethan's sleeve and asked, "Can we go to the comic book store again later?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yeah, if your mom's okay with it." Sabrina nodded. "If you finish your chores first." "Deal," Leo said, diving back into his drawing. Ethan glanced at her across the kitchen, eyes soft. "Thanks for letting me stay." "You're not a guest anymore," she said quietly. Later that day, as they walked into town, Ethan holding Leo's backpack, Sabrina beside them, the three of them looked almost ordinary. And for Sabrina, that was the most extraordinary part. At the comic book shop, Leo wandered off, buried in the back shelves. Sabrina and Ethan stood by the window, watching him flip through pages with the kind of joy that didn't cost a thing. "I thought he'd need more time," she said. "He might," Ethan replied, "but I think he's giving me a head start." She smiled. "I got an offer last week," he added after a beat. "A speaking series. Forbes, Wall Street Journal, some tech panels. International. 3 months on the road." She looked at him, bracing. "I turned it down." Surprise flickered in her eyes. "Why?" He shrugged. "Because I finally have something worth staying for." The words landed like a quiet confession. "You sure?" she asked. "You used to run from anything that made you feel tied down." "I'm not tied," he said. "I'm grounded." And there it was. The truth she hadn't let herself hope for. That night back at the house, after Leo had fallen asleep beside a half-finished dinosaur comic, Ethan and Sabrina sat on the porch. A warm breeze moved through the trees, and the sky was streaked with late summer pink. "I don't want to rush this," he said, staring out at the fading light. "Us. I just want you to know I'm here, for the long haul. Whether that's as Leo's dad or as something more with you, I'll earn it. No shortcuts." Sabrina leaned her head against the back of the chair. "That's good, because I don't want a savior. I want a partner." He reached over, gently lacing his fingers through hers. Not forceful, just open. She didn't pull away. They sat like that in the quiet, the stars slowly blinking to life above them, the hum of crickets rising around them. No headlines, no curated image, just a woman, a man, and the boy inside sleeping peacefully, knowing, finally, that his dad was real, and here. The auditorium at Redwood Elementary buzzed with low chatter and the occasional burst of kid laughter. Foldable chairs creaked beneath proud parents. Homemade signs reading Heroes Day hung across the back wall, glittered letters slightly askew. The stage was decorated with cut-out stars and stick-figure posters labeled, "My Hero Is." Ethan sat in the third row, between Sabrina and a mom who smelled like vanilla lotion and anxiety. He wore jeans and a navy sweater, his choice, not his stylist's. A thermos of coffee cooled in his hands. His leg bounced. Sabrina leaned over and stilled it with a gentle press of her hand. "He'll do great," she whispered. "I'm not nervous for him," Ethan said, then gave her a sheepish look. "Okay, I am, but mostly for me." She smiled, a real one. "Welcome to parenthood." The lights dimmed, and the principal, a petite woman with a powerful microphone voice, welcomed everyone. One by one, children filed on stage with construction paper speeches and wobbly confidence, each taking turns at the podium. Then it was Leo's turn. He walked to the mic in sneakers that lit up at the heels and a slightly crooked tie Ethan had helped him with that morning. "Hi," Leo said. "I'm Leo Reyes, and my hero is my dad." Ethan froze. "Not my friend. Not Ethan. Dad." "I didn't know my dad for a long time," Leo continued. "I used to think maybe he didn't want to know me, but then I found out he didn't even know I was around. When he did find out, he came. He stayed." He looked out into the crowd, right at Ethan. "He reads dinosaur books with me. He makes lumpy pancakes. He doesn't always understand my homework, but he tries, and he never checks his phone at dinner." Soft laughter from the audience. "I think being a hero isn't about doing everything right," Leo said. "It's about showing up, even when it's hard." He stepped back, and the applause filled the room like warmth. Ethan blinked fast, swallowed hard. Sabrina reached over and squeezed his hand. Afterward, as the crowd filtered out into the late afternoon sun, parents congratulating kids and wiping away mascara, Leo ran up and launched into Ethan's arms. "You heard it, right?" Ethan lifted him off the ground. "I heard it, buddy." Sabrina watched them from a few feet away, arms crossed, smiling with a tenderness that softened every line in her face. When Ethan caught her gaze, something passed between them, something unspoken but whole. That evening, they sat on the back steps of Sabrina's house, watching Leo chase fireflies with a jam jar. "Remember when you used to say you couldn't see yourself with kids?" she said. He laughed. "I used to say I couldn't see myself without quarterly reports." "And now?" "Now I measure time in bedtime stories and Lego instructions." She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "You know, you never really told me," she said. "What made you stay? Not just here, but stay." He turned to her, eyes serious. "Because wealth gave me distance," he said. "But love gives me presence. I used to think power was control. Now I think it's choosing what matters. Over and over again." She was quiet for a moment. "And what matters now?" "You," he said. "Leo, this life. It's not flashy. It's not curated. But it's mine." She tilted her face up to him. "You're really not leaving, are you?" He smiled. "Number. And not because I have nowhere to go, but because I've finally found where I belong." She kissed him then. Slow. Sure. No fireworks. No camera angles. Just real. Later, as the stars took their place in the sky and Leo drifted off to sleep with his arms wrapped around his stegosaurus, Ethan lay awake, listening to the hum of a life he never saw coming. He had walked away from a wedding. from a legacy, from an empire. But what he had now was something rarer. He had love, and this time it had nothing to do with wealth, and everything to do with worth.